At a party, my wife said she'd rather kiss a stranger than kiss me. Everyone laughed, but I wasn't the fool they thought I was. When I finally spoke, the laughter died in seconds. What came next wasn't anger or tears. It was something far more devastating. This is how a quiet man strikes back. My name is Nathaniel Berkshire, though most people call me Nate. I'm 52 years old, and I've spent the last 3 decades running a regional food distribution company with my son Noah. We supply restaurants, hotels, catering companies across 4 states. It's honest work, steady income, and it gave us a comfortable life. Or so I thought. The night everything changed was September 14th at Ken and Cheryl Hansen's annual garden party. They'd been hosting these things for years, always in early fall when the weather in Georgia was perfect, warm enough for cocktails on the patio, but cool enough that the women could wear their expensive scarves. My wife Amanda loved these parties. Loved the gossip, the wine, the chance to show off whatever new outfit she'd bought that week. I didn't particularly enjoy them, but I went. That's what you do after 27 years of marriage. You show up, you smile, and make small talk about interest rates and college football, and you go home. Simple. Except this time, I had a plan. For the past 4 months, I'd been documenting Amanda's affair. Not suspecting, not guessing, documenting. I had dates, times, hotel receipts, text messages she thought she'd deleted, and voice messages she'd left on a burner phone I discovered hidden in her gym bag. The man's name was Kenneth Hansen, kin to his friends, and yes, that's the same Ken whose garden we were standing in that night, drinking his expensive bourbon and eating his wife's homemade crab cakes. I'd spent weeks debating how to handle it. Quiet divorce, confrontation at home, but something in me wanted the truth to come out the same way the lie had lived, in public, among friends, in a place where both of them felt safe and untouchable. The music was playing, something jazzy and forgettable, and people were scattered across the stone patio in little clusters, laughing too loud at jokes that weren't that funny. Amanda had been drinking steadily since we arrived, her cheeks flushed, her voice getting sharper with each glass of wine. I watched her from across the yard, standing near the fire pit with Cheryl and 2 other women, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a cold, quiet clarity. Around 8:30, someone suggested dancing. A few couples moved to the center of the patio, swaying awkwardly to the music. I walked over to Amanda and held out my hand. "Dance with me," I said. She looked at me like I'd suggested we jump off a bridge. "What? Since when do you dance, Nate?" "Since tonight," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "Come on, one dance." She sighed dramatically, set her wine glass down on the stone ledge, and took my hand with all the enthusiasm of someone agreeing to a dental procedure. We moved to the center of the patio, and I put my hand on her waist. She was stiff, distant, already looking past me toward the group of women near the bar. The song changed to something slower, and I leaned in, intending to kiss her cheek. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see her reaction. I needed one final confirmation that what I was about to do was justified. She pulled away sharply, almost stumbling backward, and let out a short, bitter laugh. Then, loud enough for the people around us to hear, she said it. "I'd rather kiss a stranger than kiss you, Nate." The conversations nearby stuttered to a halt. A few people turned to look. Someone laughed nervously, unsure if it was a joke. Amanda's lips curled into a smirk, enjoying the attention, enjoying the little thrill of humiliation she'd just delivered. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her, then slowly turned my gaze to Ken Hansen, who was standing near the grill with a beer in his hand, watching us with a strange, frozen expression. Then I looked back at Amanda and smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, cold one. "Funny," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Ken isn't a stranger, though, is he?" The silence that followed was absolute. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. Amanda's face went pale. Ken's beer slipped slightly in his hand, and he took a step backward, as if distance might protect him from what was coming. Cheryl, standing just a few feet away, looked between her husband and my wife, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. I turned to the crowd, keeping my tone conversational. 4 months of hotel visits. Tuesdays and Thursdays, mostly. The Marriott off exit 37. Room 214, if anyone's curious. Paid for with our joint credit card. Amanda. Not very discreet. Amanda's mouth opened. but no sound came out. Ken had gone completely white. I set my drink down on the nearest table, gave a polite nod to no one in particular, and walked toward the gate. Behind me, I could hear the beginnings of chaos. Cheryl's voice rising, someone gasping, Amanda calling my name in a tone that was half panic, half fury. I didn't look back. I got in my truck, started the engine, and drove away, leaving my wife standing in a garden full of people who now knew exactly what kind of woman she was. It was the last time most of them ever saw me as the man I used to be. I didn't go home that night. I went to the apartment I'd rented 3 months earlier under a business LLC, a clean 1-bedroom in Alpharetta, 40 minutes from our house in Roswell. Furnished, anonymous, and completely off Amanda's radar. I'd been preparing for this moment longer than she could have imagined. The next morning, Amanda woke up to an empty house. I'd left my wedding ring on her nightstand, centered perfectly on a stack of printed bank statements showing every hotel charge, every suspicious transaction, every lie documented in black and white. No note, no explanation, just evidence. My phone had been disconnected from our family plan at midnight. I'd removed myself from Find My iPhone, closed our joint checking account, and transferred my portion into a new account at a different bank. The mortgage and utilities would continue to auto-pay from an escrow account I'd set up weeks ago. Everything functional, nothing personal. By 8 in the morning, Amanda was calling my office. My assistant, Lisa, had been briefed. "Mr. Berkshire is no longer with the company," she said politely. "I'm not at liberty to discuss his whereabouts." That wasn't entirely true. I hadn't left the company. I'd restructured it. 2 weeks earlier, I transferred my ownership stake into a trust with Noah as the primary beneficiary and manager. On paper, I'd retired. In reality, I'd simply removed Amanda's access to everything I'd built. No one knew what was happening. He'd been the one who first noticed something was wrong 6 months ago when he saw Amanda having lunch with Ken Hansen at a restaurant 2 towns over. They weren't eating. They were holding hands across the table, laughing like teenagers. Noah had come to me that afternoon, conflicted and angry, and showed me the photo he'd taken on his phone. That's when I started building my exit strategy. Emma, our daughter, was another story. She lived in Charlotte, worked in marketing, and talked to her mother twice a week. She adored Amanda, saw her as strong and independent. I knew Emma would take her mother's side initially, so I prepared a package of documents to send her when the time was right. Not yet, but soon. By noon on that first day, Amanda had tried calling me 17 times. I know because I'd forwarded my old number to a voicemail service that transcribed her messages and emailed them to me. I read every one. They went from confused to angry to desperate in the span of 3 hours. "Nate, where are you? People are asking questions. This is ridiculous. We need to talk like adults. You humiliated me. You humiliated Ken and Cheryl. What is wrong with you?" And finally, around 2 in the afternoon, "Please, just come home. We can fix this." I deleted every message without responding. Words were her weapon, not mine. Silence was far more effective. That evening, I met with my attorney, Philip Grayson, at his office downtown. Philip had been preparing divorce documents for weeks, and everything was ready. We filed the petition that night, citing irreconcilable differences and attaching the evidence of Amanda's affair as supporting documentation for asset division under the terms of our prenuptial agreement. Amanda wouldn't receive the papers for another 3 days. By then, she'd already be living in a reality where I no longer existed in any form she recognized. 3 days after the party, Amanda finally understood the depth of what I'd done. The divorce papers arrived by courier at 10 in the morning, delivered to our front door in a priority envelope she had assigned for personally. I knew the exact moment she opened them because my phone pinged with a notification from the doorbell camera I'd installed months ago. What Amanda found inside wasn't just a petition for divorce. It was a comprehensive financial autopsy of our marriage, specifically of her relationship with Ken Hansen. Philip and I had spent weeks building this case. Every hotel charge on our joint credit card, cross-referenced with Ken's known travel schedule. Every suspicious wire transfer from our savings account to what appeared to be legitimate business investments, but were actually shell accounts Ken had set up. Amanda thought she'd been clever, hiding money in what looked like a real estate investment opportunity Ken had pitched to her last spring. $87,000. That's what she'd moved into Ken's development project, over 6 months, always in increments small enough that she thought I wouldn't notice. The project didn't exist. The LLC was registered to a P.O. box in Delaware, and Ken was the sole officer. Every dollar had gone into an offshore account he'd been building, insurance for when he eventually left Cheryl. But here's what Amanda didn't know. I'd been tracking it all. I'd hired a forensic accountant in May, a quiet woman named Patricia who specialized in tracing hidden assets. Patricia had followed the money through 3 shell companies and 2 state lines, documenting everything with the precision of a surgeon. The divorce filing included Patricia's full report, 83 pages of financial evidence showing that Amanda hadn't just been unfaithful, she'd been complicit in what amounted to embezzlement from our marital assets. Under our prenuptial agreement, infidelity and financial misconduct triggered a complete forfeiture clause. Amanda would get nothing beyond what the law required as a minimum, and even that would be contested. By noon, Amanda was at Philip's office, demanding to see me. Philip's secretary called me from the lobby. "Mrs. Berkshire is here," she said, her voice professionally neutral. "She's quite upset. She's insisting on speaking with you. Tell her I'm not available," I replied calmly. "And remind her that all communication needs to go through her attorney, once she retains one." That afternoon, Amanda hired Martin Fletcher, an aggressive divorce attorney known for defending wealthy wives in contentious splits. Martin was expensive, loud, and effective, but he wasn't prepared for what I'd built. The same day Amanda retained Martin, I received a call from Cheryl Hansen. Her voice was shaking, barely controlled. "Nate, I need to know something," she said. "How long has this been going on?" I told her the truth. 11 months, based on the earliest hotel receipt I'd found. Cheryl went silent for nearly 30 seconds, then said quietly, "I'm filing tomorrow. I wanted you to know that Ken won't have anywhere to hide either." 2 marriages, ending simultaneously. And Ken Hansen, the man who thought he was clever enough to manage 2 women and a financial scheme, was about to lose everything. For days after the papers were served, I sent Emma the package. Overnight delivery to her apartment in Charlotte. Signature required. Inside was a tablet, fully charged, with a single folder on the desktop labeled "The Truth." The folder contained everything. Time-stamped photos of Amanda and Ken entering hotels, credit card statements with charges highlighted, text message logs recovered from Amanda's cloud backup that she'd forgotten existed, and voice messages Amanda had left on Ken's phone, messages Patricia's team had legally obtained through a subpoena during the financial investigation. The worst message was from March, 3 weeks before Emma's birthday. Amanda's voice, breathless and excited. "I can't wait until this is over. Once Nate signs the investment papers, we'll have enough to disappear for a while. Maybe 6 months in Europe like we talked about. God, I'm so tired of playing the devoted wife." I didn't call Emma after I sent it. I didn't text. I just waited. 2 days later, my phone rang. Emma's name appeared on the screen. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Dad," she said, her voice tight and strange. "I need to see you." We met at a coffee shop near her office the next morning. Emma looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, so different from the polished, confident daughter I usually saw. She sat down across from me and didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she opened her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was an email draft, addressed to Amanda. "I wrote this last night," Emma said quietly. "I wanted you to read it before I send it." The email was devastating. Clinical and cold, Emma laid out every piece of evidence she'd reviewed, every lie Amanda had told, every manipulation she'd used to paint me as the distant, workaholic husband who didn't appreciate her. Emma's final paragraph was a single sentence. "I don't recognize the woman who raised me, and I don't want to." I looked at my daughter and saw something I'd never seen before. Clarity. The illusion of her perfect mother had shattered, and Emma was staring at the pieces, trying to understand how she'd missed it. "Don't send it yet," I said gently, pushing the laptop back toward her. "Your mother will try to explain, to justify, to make you the villain for choosing me. Let her. Let her show you exactly who she is before you respond. You'll need to see it for yourself." Emma nodded slowly, then closed the laptop. "Noah told me you planned this for months," she said. "He said you were protecting us." "I was protecting all of us," I replied, "including your mother, from herself." Emma reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, Dad." "You weren't supposed to," I said. "That was the point." Amanda's world began crumbling in ways she didn't anticipate. The garden party hadn't just exposed her affair. It had detonated her social standing in a community where reputation was currency. Within a week, the invitations stopped. The weekly book club she'd attended for 6 years suddenly had scheduling conflicts. The charity committee she'd chaired for the hospital fundraiser politely requested she step down, citing recent personal developments that might distract from their mission. Even her yoga instructor, a woman she considered a close friend, stopped responding to texts. I watched it happen through Noah, who still had connections to that world through his girlfriend Sarah. Sarah's mother was in Amanda's social circle, and the gossip flowed freely. Apparently, Cheryl Hansen had filed for divorce 3 days after the party and had been brutally honest with their mutual friends about why. Ken's affair with Amanda, the financial entanglement, the lies, all of it became public knowledge within 48 hours. Ken himself had disappeared. According to Noah's sources, he'd moved out of his house the same night as the party and was living in an extended-stay hotel near the airport. His business, a consulting firm that relied heavily on local connections and reputation, was hemorrhaging clients. 2 of his biggest accounts had terminated their contracts within a week, citing concerns about professional judgment. Cheryl, meanwhile, had retained one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in Atlanta. She'd frozen their joint accounts, filed restraining orders preventing Ken from accessing certain assets, and most devastatingly, she'd sent a detailed letter to the board of directors of the country club, where Ken had been a member for 15 years. Ken's membership was suspended pending a review, which in their world was essentially social exile. But the real blow to Amanda came from an unexpected source, her employer. Amanda had worked as the regional HR director for a healthcare management company for the past 8 years. It was a respectable position, well paid, and it gave her the professional identity she'd always craved. But corporate HR departments have a zero-tolerance policy for personal scandals that might reflect poorly on the company, especially when those scandals involve financial impropriety. Someone, I never found out who, had sent Amanda's company an anonymous tip about the investment scheme with Ken. The email included copies of bank statements and the LLC registration documents showing Ken's offshore account. It didn't accuse Amanda of anything illegal, but it raised enough questions that the company's legal department felt obligated to investigate. 2 weeks after the party, Amanda was placed on administrative leave. The official reason was pending internal review of potential conflicts of interest. The real reason was that the company didn't want her name associated with theirs while a divorce involving financial fraud allegations was playing out in public records. Amanda called me for the first time since I'd left. My new phone number wasn't blocked. She'd somehow gotten it from Emma, and at 10:30 on a Tuesday night, my phone rang with her name on the screen. I answered. Didn't say anything, just waited. Nate. Her voice was strained, barely controlled. I lost my job. They put me on leave, but we both know what that means. This is your fault. You destroyed my reputation. I documented the truth, I said calmly. What you did with Ken, the money you hid, those are your choices. I just made sure people knew about them. You're a vindictive, cruel man, Amanda said, her voice rising. You humiliated me in front of everyone we know. You turned our children against me. And now you've cost me my career. You cost yourself your career, I replied evenly. The moment you decided to steal from our marriage to fund Ken's escape plan. I didn't do that. You did. There was a long silence. Then Amanda's voice came back, colder now. This isn't over, Nate. Martin says we can fight the prenup. We can prove you manipulated me into signing it. Good luck with that, I said, and ended the call. I didn't block her number. I wanted her to know she could reach me, but that I had no interest in anything she had to say. 3 months after the garden party, I did something Amanda never expected. I organized a charitable event. The occasion was the dedication of a new pediatric wing at Northside Hospital, funded in part by a donation I'd made in my parents' names. $250,000, given through the family trust that Noah and I had established when I restructured the business. It was a significant contribution, enough to warrant a formal gala and public recognition. I wasn't doing it to be noble. I was doing it to make a point. The invitation list included every person who'd been at Ken and Cheryl's garden party, plus the wider social circle Amanda had spent years cultivating. Doctors, business owners, community leaders, all the people whose opinions mattered in her world. The event was black tie, held at the Four Seasons, with a live auction and a program that included speeches from hospital administrators and grateful families. Noah and Emma both attended, standing beside me as we greeted guests in the reception hall. Emma had flown in from Charlotte specifically for the event, and she looked stunning in a navy dress that reminded me of her mother at that age. But unlike Amanda, Emma's elegance came with substance. She'd spent the past 3 months volunteering at a children's clinic in her spare time. Inspired, she told me, by wanting to do something meaningful after watching how her mother had wasted so much. Sarah, Noah's girlfriend, was there too. Sweet girl, worked as a teacher, exactly the kind of person Noah needed. Stable, honest kind. The 4 of us stood together near the entrance, a united front, and I watched as people approached, offering congratulations and admiration. "Your family must be so proud," one woman said, someone I vaguely recognized from the country club. "We are," Emma replied smoothly, her hand resting on my arm. "Dads always believe in giving back to the community. It's one of the things I admire most about him." The contrast wasn't lost on anyone. Here I was, the abandoned husband, investing in children's health care and standing with my children, who clearly respected and supported me. And where was Amanda? Conspicuously absent, her name noticeably missing from the program, her social exile complete. During the speeches, the hospital CEO, Dr. Margaret Hollis, took the microphone and thanked the donors by name. When she mentioned the Berkshire Family Trust, the room applauded, and I stood briefly to acknowledge it. The applause was genuine, warm, and it felt like vindication. Afterward, during the cocktail reception, Cheryl Hansen approached me. She looked different than she had at her garden party, thinner, more severe, but there was a strength in her expression that hadn't been there before. "Nate," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for inviting me tonight. This is a beautiful event." I shook her hand. "I'm glad you could come. I wanted you to know," Cheryl continued, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "My divorce was finalized last week. King got almost nothing. The prenup I made him sign 12 years ago held up perfectly." "I'm glad," I said, and I meant it. "You did the right thing," Cheryl added, "walking away the way you did, not engaging with her drama. I've taken a page from your playbook." I nodded. Sometimes the best response is silence. "And success," Cheryl said, glancing around the elegant ballroom. "This is how you win, Nate. Not by fighting, but by building something better." She was right. Amanda had expected me to collapse, to beg, to fight her publicly. Instead, I disappeared, restructured my life, and emerged stronger, more respected, and surrounded by people who actually mattered. 6 months after I'd walked out of that garden party, Amanda finally forced a face-to-face meeting. Not through lawyers, not through intermediaries, but by showing up at Noah's office unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon. Noah called me immediately. "Dad, Mom's here." His voice was tense. "She's demanding to see you. She says she won't leave until you talk to her." I was 20 minutes away, having lunch with a supplier. "I'll be there in 15, I told him. "Keep her in the conference room. Don't let her near any files or computers." When I arrived, Noah was standing outside the conference room, looking uncomfortable. Through the glass wall, I could see Amanda sitting at the table, her posture rigid, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked thinner than I remembered, harder somehow, like the past month had stripped away something essential. I walked in and closed the door behind me. Didn't sit down, just stood near the door with my arms crossed. Amanda looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or exhaustion. But then her jaw tightened, and the familiar defiance returned. "We need to talk," she said. "We're communicating through our attorneys," I replied calmly. "That was the agreement." "I don't care about the agreement, Nate. I need you to hear me." Her voice was strained, barely controlled. "You've destroyed everything. My job, my friends, my relationship with our children. You've systematically dismantled my entire life. I documented your affair and the money you stole," I said evenly. "Everything that happened after that was a consequence of your choices, not my actions. Kim manipulated me," Amanda said, leaning forward. "He told me the investment was legitimate. He showed me paperwork, projections. I didn't know it was fake." "You knew you were hiding money from me," I replied. "You knew you were meeting him in hotels every week. You knew exactly what you were doing." Amanda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You humiliated me in front of everyone we know. You could have handled this privately, but you chose to destroy me publicly. You humiliated yourself, I said, my voice still calm. I just made sure people knew the truth. And the truth is that you spent 11 months lying to me, stealing from our marriage, and planning to disappear with another woman's husband. I loved him, Amanda said, and for the first time, her voice broke slightly. I know that doesn't excuse what I did, but I loved him, and he loved me. Ken loved your money, I said bluntly. He was building an offshore account to escape his wife, and you were his funding source. Patricia traced every dollar. He never intended to stay with you, Amanda. He was using you. She stared at me, and I saw the moment the last illusion shattered. Her face went pale, and she sat back down slowly, like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. That's not true, she whispered. It is, I said quietly. And somewhere deep down, you already knew it. The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. Then Amanda looked up at me with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability. What happens now? She asked. The divorce proceeds, I said. You get what the prenup allows, which isn't much given the circumstances. You move on with whatever life you can build. And we stop pretending we have anything left to say to each other. The children hate me, Amanda said, her voice barely audible. The children are disappointed in you, I corrected. There's a difference. Whether they forgive you eventually is up to them, not me. But I won't stop them if they choose to have a relationship with you. Amanda nodded slowly, then stood. She looked smaller, somehow diminished. I'm sorry, Nate. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. It's worth nothing, I said, not unkindly, just honestly. But I appreciate you saying it. She walked past me toward the door, then paused. You always were the better person, she said quietly. No, I replied. I was just the one who kept his promises. Amanda left without another word, and I watched through the glass as she walked down the hallway and disappeared around the corner. Noah appeared beside me a moment later. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said. I am. And I meant it. 2 years after the divorce was finalized, Emma got married. She'd met someone good, a systems engineer named David who worked for a tech company in Charlotte. Steady, kind, exactly what Emma needed. The wedding was in November, a small ceremony at a vineyard in the mountains, close friends and family only. Amanda wasn't invited. Emma had made that decision herself, after months of sporadic, difficult conversations with her mother that never quite resolved anything. Amanda had tried to rebuild the relationship, sending cards, texts, occasional gifts, but the foundation had been shattered, and Emma wasn't interested in reconstructing something that felt fundamentally dishonest. I don't hate her, Emma told me 6 months before the wedding, when she first mentioned that Amanda wouldn't be coming. But I don't trust her, and I don't want her there on the most important day of my life. I didn't argue. I told Emma years ago that her relationship with her mother was hers to define, and I meant it. The morning of the wedding, I stood in Emma's suite at the Vineyards Inn, helping her with a clasp on her necklace. She looked radiant in a simple ivory dress, her hair swept up, her eyes bright with happiness and nerves. You look beautiful, I said quietly. Thanks, Dad. Emma turned to face me, and I saw tears gathering in her eyes. I'm glad you're here. There's nowhere else I'd be, I replied. I mean it, Emma said, her voice thick. You could have fallen apart after everything that happened. You could have become bitter or angry. But you didn't. You just kept moving forward, kept building something better. You taught me what strength actually looks like. I pulled her into a hug, careful not to wrinkle her dress. You were always strong, Emma. You just needed to see it in yourself. The ceremony was perfect, simple, genuine, filled with people who actually cared about Emma and David. Noah stood beside me as we watched Emma walk down the aisle, and Sarah held his hand, 6 months pregnant with their first child. Beside us sat Philip, my attorney who'd become a friend over the years, and Patricia, the forensic accountant who'd helped me document everything, now someone I occasionally met for coffee. During the reception, Emma pulled me onto the dance floor for the father-daughter dance. The song was one I'd played for her when she was little, and as we swayed to the music, she rested her head on my shoulder. Do you ever think about her? Emma asked quietly. Your mother? Yeah. Sometimes, I admitted, but not the way you might think. I don't miss her. I just wonder if she ever figured out who she really was. She called me last week, Emma said. Wanted to know if she could send a gift. What did you tell her? I said no thank you. Emma pulled back slightly to look at me. Was that cruel? It was honest, I said. And you have every right to set boundaries. The song ended, and Emma hugged me tightly. I love you, Dad. Thank you for showing me what integrity looks like. I love you too, sweetheart. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began leaving, I stood on the terrace overlooking the vineyard, a glass of bourbon in my hand. Noah joined me, loosening his tie. Good day, he said. The best, I agreed. Sarah and I have been talking, Noah said after a moment. When the baby comes, we want to name him after Grandpa. If it's a boy, I mean. I looked at my son, this young man who'd stood by me through everything, who'd helped me rebuild, who'd become the kind of person I was proud to call family. He would have loved that, I said. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains, surrounded by family we'd chosen and built, so far removed from the chaos of that garden party 2 years ago that it felt like a different lifetime. Because it was. The final divorce hearing took place on a gray morning in March, nearly 3 years after that garden party. The courtroom was small, utilitarian, with fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out and sterile. I arrived early with Philip, wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather portfolio that contained nothing I actually needed. Everything relevant had already been submitted weeks ago. Amanda arrived 10 minutes before the hearing was scheduled to start. She was alone. Martin Fletcher had withdrawn from her case 6 months earlier, citing irreconcilable differences with the client, which was attorney speak for my client won't listen to reason. Amanda had gone through 2 more lawyers since then before finally representing herself, which Philip had warned me was a disaster waiting to happen. She looked different. Older, obviously, but more than that. There was a hardness to her features now, a permanent tension around her eyes and mouth that hadn't been there before. She'd lost weight, too much of it, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame. We didn't speak or make eye contact. We simply sat on opposite sides of the courtroom and waited. Judge Marilyn Hendricks entered at 9 o'clock sharp. She was in her 60s, with steel gray hair and a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency. She reviewed the file briefly, then looked up at both of us over her reading glasses. This is the final hearing for the dissolution of marriage between Nathaniel Berkshire and Amanda Berkshire, she said. I've reviewed all submitted documents, including the financial disclosures, the prenuptial agreement, and the evidence of marital misconduct. Does either party have any final statements before I issue my ruling? Amanda stood. Your Honor, I'd like to request one more continuance to. Request denied. Judge Hendricks interrupted, not unkindly but firmly. Mrs. Berkshire, you've had 3 years and multiple attorneys to prepare your case. We're proceeding today. Amanda sat back down, her jaw tight. The judge spent the next 20 minutes outlining her decision. The prenuptial agreement was valid and enforceable. Amanda's affair and the financial misconduct constituted material breaches of the marriage contract. The division of assets would proceed according to the prenup's terms. Amanda would receive a lump sum payment of $75,000, her personal vehicle, and any personal property she'd brought into the marriage. Everything else, the house, the business, the investment accounts, the lake property, remained with me or in the family trust I'd established with the children. Amanda would also be responsible for half of the $87,000 she'd invested with Ken Hansen, since the court considered it a personal debt incurred through her actions. When Judge Hendricks finished, she looked at both of us. The marriage is dissolved. You're both free to move forward with your lives. I strongly suggest you do so without further contact unless absolutely necessary. She banged her gavel once, and it was over. Amanda stood and walked out immediately, not looking at me or Philip. I watched her leave and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a quiet sense of completion. Outside the courthouse, Philip shook my hand. It's done, Nate. You can close this chapter now. I closed it 3 years ago, I said. This was just the paperwork catching up. I drove to Noah's house afterward. He and Sarah had asked me to stop by after the hearing, no matter how it went. When I arrived, Emma was there too, having flown in from Charlotte that morning. Noah was grilling steaks in the backyard while Sarah held their 6-month-old son, Patrick, named after my father. How'd it go? Emma asked when I walked through the gate. It's finished, I said simply. Emma hugged me tightly. Good. You deserve to be done with all of that. We spent the afternoon together, the four of us plus Patrick, eating good food and talking about normal things. Future things. Noah and Sarah were looking at houses in a better school district. Emma and David were thinking about moving back to Georgia now that David's company had opened an Atlanta office. The business was growing, and I was gradually stepping back, letting Noah take the lead while I focused on being a grandfather and maybe doing some traveling. As the sun began setting, casting long shadows across the yard, I held Patrick while Sarah and Emma cleaned up inside. Noah sat beside me on the porch steps. You ever regret how you handled it? He asked quietly. Walking away like you did, the public confrontation, all of it. I thought about it for a moment, really considered the question. Then I shook my head. No, I protected what mattered. I protected you and Emma and the life we built. Your mother made her choices, and I made mine. I don't regret standing up for myself. Good, Noah said, because I'm proud of how you handled it. You show me what it means to have a backbone. I looked at my son, this good man who'd stood beside me through everything, and felt grateful. Not for what had happened, but for what we'd built in spite of it. If you told me 5 years ago that I'd be standing on a dock in Maine, watching the sunrise over the Atlantic with a woman I'd met at a hospital fundraiser, I would have laughed. But that's exactly where I found myself one morning in late summer, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt genuinely content. Her name was Claire. Dr. Claire Hutchins, a pediatric oncologist I'd met 2 years after the divorce was finalized. She'd been speaking at the hospital gala where I'd made my donation, and afterward, we'd ended up in the same conversation circle. She was intelligent, direct, and had a laugh that made everyone around her smile. She'd been widowed 5 years earlier when her husband died of a heart attack at 49, and she had a teenage son named Matthew. Good kid, quiet, loved astronomy and terrible science fiction movies. Claire and I'd taken things slowly. Dinner here and there, phone calls that lasted hours, a shared appreciation for honesty and not playing games. When I'd told her about Amanda and the divorce, she'd listened without judgment, then said simply, people show you who they are. You just have to be willing to see it. We've been together for almost a year now, and it felt right in a way my marriage to Amanda never had. Not dramatic, not complicated, just comfortable and genuine. The main trip was Claire's idea. She owned a small cottage her parents had left her, right on the water, and she'd invited me to spend a week there. Matthew was at science camp, and we had the place to ourselves. We'd spent the days hiking, reading, cooking meals together, and talking about everything and nothing. That morning, as we stood on the dock watching the sunrise, Claire leaned against me and said, I'm glad you're here. Me too, I replied, meaning it completely. Emma called me yesterday, Claire said casually. Asked if I'd like to go dress shopping with her next month. For the baptism. Emma and David's first child, a daughter they'd named Sophie, was being baptized in October, and Emma had asked if Claire would be her godmother. It was Emma's way of showing acceptance, of welcoming Claire into the family. What did you tell her? I asked. I said yes, obviously. Claire smiled. Your daughter's pretty wonderful, you know. She learned from watching you, I said, and Claire laughed. Smooth talker. We stayed there until the sun was fully up, and then walked back to the cottage for coffee and the blueberry pancakes Claire insisted on making from scratch. Later that week, Noah called with news. He and Sarah were pregnant again, and this time they were having twins. Girls. Noah sounded simultaneously terrified and ecstatic. Dad, I don't know if I'm ready for 3 kids under 3, he said, laughing nervously. Nobody's ever ready, I told him. You just figure it out as you go. The week in Maine ended too quickly, but when Claire and I drove back to Georgia, it wasn't with sadness. It was with plans. More trips, holidays together, maybe eventually combining households when Matthew graduated high school in 2 years. Life had become something I looked forward to again, not something I endured or managed. I had grandchildren I adored, children who respected me, work that challenged me without consuming me, and a partner who saw me clearly and chose me anyway. Amanda existed somewhere out there, living whatever life she'd managed to build. I didn't think about her often anymore, and when I did, it was with distant curiosity rather than anger or regret. She'd made her choices, lived with the consequences, and I'd moved on completely. On my 57th birthday, 5 years after that garden party, I woke up in my own home, the one I bought after selling the house Amanda and I had shared. Claire was beside me, and downstairs I could hear Emma and David getting Sophie ready, while Noah wrangled Patrick and Sarah managed the twins. It was chaos, beautiful chaos, and it was mine. That afternoon, surrounded by family, I blew out the candles on a cake Emma had made, and when everyone asked what I'd wished for, I smiled and said, "Nothing. I have everything I need." And I meant it. The life I'd built after Amanda wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and it was filled with people who valued the same things I did. Integrity, loyalty, respect. The fundamentals that should have been there from the beginning. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so good, so solid, that the past becomes irrelevant. And that's exactly what I'd done.